You're such an asshole.
Everybody, the good old Captain here with Asshole Consulting. You can go to Asshole Consulting if you have questions. And it does not have to be a video response. It can be an email if you want it to be private. But you do have to pay, regardless. That goes out to especially you millennials who think everything is free. Oh my goodness. Hey Cap, it's getting later in life. I don't want to have to use the Smith & Wesson retirement plan, or at least delay it as long as possible. I have a bit of cash coming in and a hodgepodge of equities, cash, and bullion. I'm tired of the mutual fund guys giving me their bullshit conflict of interest recommendations for investments. My questions are as follows. 1, are negative interest rates on the way, and if so, here to stay? Is this being driven by a glut of cash printed and dumped into the world markets? Well, this is, if you want to have a video, I'll link down to it below about exactly what are negative interest rates. Are they here to stay? I don't know. I'm going to say yes, at least in yours and my lifetime. And the reason why, and we'll kind of do a philosophical top-down analysis. Economics doesn't just form in a vacuum. It's not this standalone thing. It is representative of the culture and society and the humans that populate this world and our countries. And the countries that have negative interest rates is basically, once you boil it down to it, is that governments are promising, politicians are promising the parasitic population, the parasites of our countries, free crap. But they want to get reelected, so they don't increase taxes because they'd lose votes. So we run deficits, right? We spend way more than our economies are capable of producing. So inevitably, you can run that gig for a while, but what ends up happening is that people aren't going to lend you money anymore because they say you're never going to pay this back. I mean, I get a kick out of people. I get a kick out of any foreigners that actually buy U.S. government treasuries. It's like, you're lending to a heroin addict, and some do, and they're idiots, but they're getting smarter and smarter. Not to mention, we're spending more and more, especially under Obama, on our parasitic classes. So where do they come up with the money? Well, they got to print it off. And this is what they call it cutesy euphemisms like quantitative easing. But pretty much every major central bank, Bank of Japan, Bank of England, not Bank of Europe, what is that one called? The European Union's central bank, our Federal Reserve, we're all printing off more money under quantitative easing. Actually, that's a bigger bullshit. So that we can finance this gap. Now, the United States can get away with that for a little bit, as can the Bank of Japan and even the Bank of England, because our currencies and our economies are relatively stable. Certainly more stable than a lot of these kleptocracies and basically the second and third world countries. Even as shitty as our first world countries are, as shitty as Japan's finances, the United States finances, England finances, all that, we're still not as bad. We're Western civilization. We still have our fucking shit relatively together to the rest of the countries in this world. So there's still demand. You'd rather hold yen than Bolivian bolivars, or whatever the hell the currency is in that second world, third world shithole. Certainly, Venezuelans would gladly take pounds over their, I think they actually do have the bolivar, not the peso. So even though we're horrible lending risks, there is demand for foreign currencies on the international market. So this money, even though we print it off, doesn't actually end up being circulated in our economies. It actually gets sopped up a little bit by the globe as people are trying to invest in different paper to hedge against a collapse of their own currency. So that's one reason why we don't see inflation. And because if inflation was high enough, you have to have interest rates higher than inflation. So that's why all this printing of money doesn't necessarily result in inflation. Then there's also just a lack of fucking demand for the money. The whole idea behind monetary policy is it hinges on one huge assumption, and that is people want to go and be entrepreneurial. There's demand to borrow money. Now, this is once again where the society by which we live in determines the economics. Okay, economics is derived by society. If you look at our society, well, let's look. Japan is a perfect example. I'll go into the United States and Canada. But let's take a look at Japan. Japan right now is in the doldrums. It has been in doldrums, especially after the collapse in 1990, the stock market collapse. The big booming Japanese empire was over, or at least the bubble was over. Now they had the culture, the work ethic, the capacity to keep growing, but for the past, we're approaching what, 25 years now? Are we approaching? We're 25 years certainly, but we're approaching 30 years of just barely enough growth to maintain standards of living. Why? And by the way, the Bank of Japan has just been throwing money at its people, saying, "Come on, do something." Well, why do people do something? Why would I go into a business? Well, we have to ask, where does the majority of economic growth, innovation, creativity come from? Sorry, it comes from, well, not men. It actually doesn't come from men. It comes from, I know it's going to sound crass, it comes from the vag. Now, who wants the vag? Men want the vag. What do men do to get the vag? Well, we got to get access to the vag. Well, who grants access to the vag? The female brain. Ooh, talk about a gatekeeper. Woo! So, over the millennia, men have waged war, try to figure this out. Our top scientists we put on, and we find out, we're not too sure, but we find out women like stuff, and like stability and security and resources. So what do men do? We build fucking civilization. And how do we predominantly do that? Well, we get into power, or maybe we wage war. But more recently, especially past, say, 200 years, it was building stuff. It was creating wealth. It was creating resources. And this is how, basically, civilization was created. We build houses, we build cars, we build engines, we build microwaves. We do whatever it is to get access to that vag, we will go ahead and produce it. Now, since women ultimately, behind every great man is a good woman, or whatever the saying is, that's truer than hell. Women are the muse. They're the only reasons men get up and do anything at any time. And if you look, what was it, Chris Rock said, if there were no women, men would live in caves or cardboard boxes. We probably would, because like, fuck it, I'm going to go sit down and relax and go fish. Nothing else to do. Hi, Bob. Oh, hiya, Bill. What's going on? Nothing. Should we go fish? Throw rocks in the lake? Yeah. We'd all just be running around and smoking cigars, drinking booze. Maybe we get around to inventing booze, but we wouldn't fucking build civilization, because there'd be no pussy to go and get. So let's take a look at the socio aspect of society. Well, what's happened in Japan? Well, a very brief introduction, and perhaps somebody who lives in Japan can provide a little bit more detail. What you had is that work till death mentality in the 70s and the 80s. And Japan recovered from World War II. They're about to take over the world globally, economically. And all these men worked all this money. But the culture was, though, that women are in control of the money, which is weird to me, but I'm not Japanese. And so what a lot of young boys saw was their mothers divorcing these men who just slaved away, gave all these women everything, and now the women just decide to divorce them. They're not rewarding them with sex. They're not giving them the vag, even though they may be married. And this is not all Japanese women. Don't fucking come in here. I know it's all Asian. But these men just, and especially after the collapse of the economy, so you have this great recession, they've never really fully recovered. Men have lost all agency, and the women, the ones that were married to these, we could see veritable champions that made Japan the phoenix from the ashes. Now, this generation, you could say the herbivores, the generation of Japanese men, say my age and younger, they saw what happened to their old men, not too unlike what we saw here happening in Western civilization, where it's like watching the quarterback get sacked. You're like, ooh, you're watching your old man get divorced. You're like, ooh, ouch, you wince, like you got, like seeing a line drive go right into the nuts of the second baseman or third baseman. You're like, ooh, maybe I don't want it. Then there's also the dating experiences. You can never discount this enough, right? I don't know what it was like in Japan, but I've heard through different people and reporting that the Japanese women are incredibly snooty, incredibly picky, even mockingly so. Like, they'll have two different boyfriends. I do remember, this is going back to the 90s. A friend of mine who did live in Japan was fluent in Japanese. He's like, the women there have two types of men: the men that they date, that they really like, but then the men that they also want to get stuff from, or they're kind of like they're the emotional tampon. And it sounded like this paralleled what was happening in the United States, Canada, and larger Western civilization, where these women are just like, whoa, they're toxic. They're poison. And you women could go and complain that, oh, not all women are like that. Zip it, zip, zip. Did you date more women than me? No, you haven't. Okay, and trust you me, the vast majority of women, at least in the United States, those that I dated, were not worth the time of it, and they drive you away from. You're like, wow. I mean, think how bad that is. Think how bad that is. That you can drive a man so far away with your behavior that he no longer wants to have sex. Or, yeah, they'd like to have sex, but the cost and the pain and the hurdles to get it is not worth it anymore. Thus is born not only MGTOW, the herbivore movement, or men just kind of like, ooh, I mean, and you see this. This is not theory. This is not angry men who couldn't get laid. Men are proposing later in life. They're not getting married. Then you have all these other aspects developing in terms of technology and finances. Well, we all got to go. There's progressive credentialism. Men have to go and get degrees, as do women. You can't just get a job out of high school. You're going to load up with a ton of student loans. Maybe you're not really going to pay off those students, so you're in no financial situation to actually afford a family or start making the world go around or build civilization or create the frickin' microwave. And then also with the internet. Now the internet comes around. Now, by my age, yeah, sure there was porn, but you had to like wait forever to download it. Back in my day, we had to wait an hour to see a boobie, and you kids are so spoiled with your YouTube videos. It wasn't something you would, well, some guys did waste hours upon it, but by the time I was getting out of college, porn was not the big thing that it is today, that just sops up all the kids' time, all the young boys' time and energy. But that is especially pronounced today. So the men, the boys, playing video games, watching more porn. You go out on dates, they're a pain in the ass, you have to go and get a date, the girls, and then girls on the other end are driven with all the social media attention. So you think like with men pulling out, demand pulling out of the market, prices would drop. In other words, women would lower their, say, okay, I'll go out with you. But women are doing the opposite because they're getting their emotional attention fix from social media, all these men just clicking instead of actually going up to a girl, asking the girl out, learning how to dance, repairing his car to pick up the girl. In other words, they're going like this. And there's a lack of not only dating, but production. Men are retiring at basically 20. They're not producing shit. So, the reason for this long thing, to connect it all together, is if your primary economic engine, men, are already dropping out of the economy, and they don't care, or they just can't get to the point that they can actually be productive because we put way too many hurdles in front of them in terms of educational requirements, the baby boomers, don't even get me started about their managerial practices, and there's no reward, they have no incentive. Well, you can lower interest rates all you want. You can print off all the money you want. You can recapitalize the banks all you want. You can get banks to lower their Wall Street Journal Prime down to 2%. If there's no demand to borrow those dollars to start a business, then that money sits there. And unfortunately, if you're a bank, you pay the Federal Reserve an interest rate, or it's technically the interbank. I'm not going to bore you with that stuff. But this money does actually burn a hole in their pockets. So if there is no demand because there's no economic growth, and there is no economic growth, if you just look at GDP figures, the banks are now like, all right, we normally would make money on lending money out at, say, 5% and paying our depositors 2%. Now we have no one borrowing. We can't find borrowers. But everyone wants to use the bank as a place to deposit their money. Well, we got to cover our costs somehow. Even Deutsche Bank lost all of its profits dropped by 98% because there's no demand for borrowing. So they say, okay, now, we're going to lose profits, and we're going to close. So now we have to actually start treating you not as a arbitrage, or we take in money at 1% and lend it out at another. They're truly a bank. They're a storage facility. And as you know, like if you store your car or you store all your wife's shit in a storage facility, the guy who owns the storage facility say, hey, you got to pay rent. And that is basically what negative interest rates are, is you are paying the bank to keep your money safe, which is actually how it used to be in the olden days with gold and silver. You pay someone to keep it in a vault so that robbers and thieves wouldn't get it. So I do believe negative interest rates are here to stay for quite some time because the long-term socio-demographic, psychosexual, not outline, infrastructure, the playground, the world, that has been laid for at least the next generation. We treat boys like girls. We want girls to be boys, and men are really bad at being women, and women are really bad at being boys. And without men, without giving them any kind of incentive to go forth, compete, to win that badge, to go and build, so there's going to be, I predict there will be very little demand. Sure, there'll be people who want to go and start a business. There's certainly no doubt about it. But once you've laid up these boys with the Ritalin, you told them they're worthless, you tell them they're bigots and sexists, and especially if you want to start slamming the two Asians and whites, who predominantly produce the majority of economic growth, not just due to population, but because we create and innovate more. If you want to accuse them of privilege and racism and bigotry and sexism, starting at when they hit kindergarten, you're going to kill your economic engine. So therefore, there's not going to be any demand. Therefore, there's going to be no demand for money, and therefore, there's going to be negative interest rates. All right, and that's the other thing is since. Yes, so we could print off this money, but the money just sits there in the bank's capital accounts. It's not lent out. It never gets into the economy, therefore it never causes inflation. So this is where that irony, aren't we printing off a ton of money? Where's the inflation? Well, the money's got to get into the economy and start circulating to be an inflation. But if men are watching porn, no, I don't want to start a business, and they're looking and playing their video games, that money will just sit there. So in other words, we kind of give the government this perpetual way to just basically debase the currency and finance its financing of the parasitic classes. So, is this driven being by club today? Yeah, so that answered your question. I hope it did answer your question, so that's why I think they're here to stay. Are dividend-type equities, which seem to be at all-time highs, being driven by these interest rates and also the fact that the boomers are trying to find some cash flow? There's the money doesn't just necessarily sit in banks' capital accounts. A lot of the interest rates are very low, and so you have companies, corporations saying wow, look at these low interest rates. Now, that company could go and borrow at 2% and build a plant and a facility. But why should it? You're just going to get taxed more. You got to hire people. And also, there's really no demand. Economy's slowing down, the global economy, especially the United States and the West. Why would we invest in this particular market? So they say, okay, what else can we do? This is very low interest rates. What can we do? We say, well, look, if we buy back our shares, we borrow at 2%, and we got to pay a dividend of 4 or 5%. Not to mention if we repurchase half our shares, all of our stock options go up a lot because stock repurchases are a good thing. So what corporations have been doing, and I'd have to look up the figures, it's definitely over $1 trillion now. They've borrowed well over $1 trillion to repurchase all these shares. Now that drives stock prices up, but the underlying profit potential of the company, they didn't buy any more plants, they didn't buy any more subsidiaries or anything like that. All they did was change the financing of how the financing of the company was. So the assets are the exact same, which means your profit potential is the exact same. So all they did was drive up the price without changing their underlying profit potential. So that's where the dividend-type equities, yes, they are at all-time. I looked it up. I think the dividend yield's 2.05%. It's something pathetic. So yes, some of that central bank money and some of that monetary policy is resulting directly in affecting and driving up stock prices relative to dividends. Are they being driven by interest? Also, the fact that the boomers are trying to find some cash flow. Yeah, I think the boomers, when you're younger, you go ahead and you invest in anything with a .com. That was the rage in the 90s. You go for growth, and the company didn't necessarily have to make money. You want long-term growth, and then you hope that after casting your oats, one of them falls in the soil of Google, and then that sprouts up, and you make 1,000% rate of return. But as you get older, then you switch to quality standard corporate stocks, maybe some high-end corporate bonds, dividend-paying stocks. You want to start generating some income. So there is that general slow glacial shift as they get older, and then they'll shift out of that and they'll move to to fixed income. All three baby boomers that adequately saved up for retirement. Come on, baby, light my fire. I went to Woodstock, man. Yeah, we were a generation. Not you personally, I'm just. 3, does it make sense to be putting money into a stock market that is at all-time highs? And if not, what is the best alternative investment? Cash, bullion, real estate? It doesn't. No, it doesn't. Not for me personally. I can't give you specific financial advice because you're at a different stage in your game than I am. I do believe with quantitative easing, expansionary monetary policy, low interest rates, that stocks will have this kind of inflationary hedge, this natural hedge to them, because let's say the dollars flood the market in the future at some point in time. That the corporations build essentially commodities. They provide goods and services that people want. Well, if all of a sudden there's a ton more money and their costs go up, they're going to raise it, and people need these goods and services. So not only will their prices go up, but also their earnings and their profits will go up. Not more adjusted for inflation. Remember, a Big Mac is a Big Mac. In Zimbabwe, it just happens to cost a lot more Zimbabwean dollars, but still a Big Mac. But the profit they make on a Zimbabwe Big Mac is whatever, $1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars, which is still, what, $1 in the United States? I don't know. So I'm not, and see, here's the thing, I'm an economist, but I'm a good one. I'll admit, I don't know what's going to happen. I wish I did. I see these long-term sociological trends kind of forcing the government to keep printing off money, keep pursuing our current monetary policy, which would then kind of ensure that the stock market would be a natural hedge against inflation, but you don't know. I don't know, right? So then it becomes an issue of timing. You're older than me. You're 50-something or whatever. So you're pretty close. So, I have a much longer investment horizon. I'm like, well, okay, 40, 30 years, is this bullshit still going to be happening? Japan is any indication, yeah. But you are going to retire relatively sooner. You're going to cash out sooner. So I wouldn't necessarily be against investing in the stock market, but understand you're only doing it for capital gains and a hedge against inflation. And you could say, well, that's what gold and silver for. Well, I mean, even gold and silver don't pay dividends. They're just gold, and they don't poop out little ounces of gold and silver. So there is a financial argument, an investment argument to invest in the stock market because at least it pays dividends of 2%. But understand why you'd be investing in the stock market. Not necessarily because you want that whopping 2% in dividends, shucks howdy. If the government increases the monetary or the money supply, invariably that would seep into the price of goods and services, which corporations can charge more, and you have this natural hedge against inflation. The best alternative investments, cash, that's not an investment, it just sits there. I don't like having cash. What I would do if you have like tons of cash, pay off your debts. If you have debts, pay them off. That's the one thing I can guarantee you. That's the one thing I say do. I have no problem giving that advice whatsoever because no one ever got into trouble paying off their debts early. So I would get rid of your debts. All right, so that's the first thing you do. Bullion. I'm definitely for precious metals, but I don't want you to go overboard with it. My general rule of thumb is just 2 of them. For each person, have 200 pieces of silver or 200 ounces of silver. And if you want more than that, it's 200 pieces of silver was what? That'd insure, by my estimation, $100,000 worth of purchasing power. So if you had a $500,000 estate that you'd like to insure with precious metals, was it 5 times 200? So you'd need to get 1,000 pieces of silver. Gold I'm not big on because it's not divisible. It's too valuable. So in case of an economic collapse, okay, you can have your ounce of gold, but who's going to sell, you can't trade that ounce of gold for water, a bucket of water. So I'm a little bit hesitant there. Real estate, you can invest in real estate investment trusts because of all the money flooding into the market because of retirement dollars and monetary policy. They too have low dividends. Their dividends have been dropping as well. So you could find a real estate investment trust that pays a high dividend, or you can invest in real estate yourself. I kind of like that a little bit better, but you got to do it right. Do you want to be a landlord? Being a landlord's a pain in the ass. So I would avoid people. If I were to do it all over again, I look at parking lots. Parking lots are great. There's no infrastructure. There's no bullshit. You put some dude over there. Heck, you just put a machine on the property and people pay you, and you park cars. So cars don't complain about noise or the water not running, and you don't really have to repair a parking lot all that much. Storage facilities. Again, it's people's stuff that's there. It's not precious little Tina who just has to have everything perfect. No, it's Tina's shit that's in the fucking storage facility. So you can look at real estate individually, but you got to do your analysis and make sure you're going to make a good rate of return. Beyond that, I'm a huge advocate of skills, going to school to get some kind of skills. Not college. I mean, can be college, but get some kind of skills. Maybe buy tools so that you could, at some point in time, you could be a mechanic or repair computers or some kind of skill that's going to be in demand no matter what, that when you're retired, you could exchange and barter your valuable time to fix things or create things or whatever it may be for people's whatever amount of inflated money it might be. And then entrepreneurship. If you can find some business, if you can find some idea that will make you money, that is a better expenditure of your time. And it's all contingent on you having to make money. That is a better expenditure of your time and money than I'd say your RRSP invested in the standard S&P 500. It's under your control. It can allow you to tell your boss to fuck off and die. It can give you freedom, lower your stress, increase your health if you do it right. Now, if you're a fucking retard and you go and you buy a fucking Bob's Sports Bar down the road that's been in and out of business 5 times in the past 5 years, you're fucked. All right? But if you come up with something crafty, something innovative, something cute, and I wouldn't go, don't borrow $1 million to go set up some factory or plant. Something small, something that if it fails, it's all right, you can afford to lose it. That's what I recommend. In your opinion, is preservation of capital the main goal right now? Yeah, well, you have to, yes, that would be the main goal, but you operate from the premise there should only be one goal. No. You got to be smarter than that. It should be capital preservation and capital growth and profits. So, this is why you have a diversified portfolio. Preserve, this is what your silver is for. Preserve that capital. This is what you invest in, say, inflation index bonds. That's what you preserve your capital with. But that's not going to solve the problem. You need to always be on the lookout and hustling for some kind of investment and opportunity, entrepreneurial, private or not, public investment or not, that is going to provide you a rate of return. Again, don't ask me what should I do with it. I charged a guy $100. He said, hey, I got some money. What should my business be? And this is after I've done like 3 videos on. Don't you dare ask me what you should do for a business. And I said, yeah, pay me $100 and I'll tell you what to do. And I just ripped into him, telling him, this is the stupidest thing. You're an arrogant, cocky prick. You're a lazy fuck. If you think that someone's going to give you a business idea. Business ideas are gold, man. That is the true. They're better than gold because they pay dividends. So if you come up with one and it's good, don't tell anybody. I mean, seriously, don't even tell your friend, like, oh, Bob, I got this great idea. Don't tell Bob. Shut the fuck up. Go run the idea. Get the patents. Then, after you start your business and you get the patents, then tell people your idea. So yeah, do that, but I'm trying to come up with my own strategy to diversify my portfolio. I want to base it on something that makes sense. I realize everyone's situation is unique. I don't know crystal balls, but like an honest opinion. Thanks. Well, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate it very much. Hope that answered some questions. I can't say that go invest in that. But I would definitely go, Morningstar.com might be something you want to look at to analyze mutual funds and things like that. Look at your rates of return, dividend yields, and other types of analyses if you're looking for public investments. But yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land. That's what investing looks like today. So hope that explains things to you. And if anybody of you got any other questions, go to assholeconsulting.com. Also, go to Facebook. Assholeconsulting.com has a Facebook page that you could go ahead and like or follow or something. And I upload some of the more interesting and controversial videos up there just in case the gooks decides that my free speech is not as free as others. Best of luck to all of you. Toodles.